The Detroit Lions have the best coordinator in football, and it's not Ben Johnson. Aaron Glenn has spent the last 4 years rebuilding and reshaping the Detroit Lions defense, and now in 2024, we are finally starting to see that work pay off. Many people, including myself, have been really tough on Aaron Glenn, especially down the stretch last season. But after what the Detroit Lions have accomplished this year, and in particular what they did last night in primetime football down in Houston, it is time to give Aaron Glenn his flowers and acknowledge him as one of the best coordinators in the game of football. Now, Aaron Glenn was a fantastic defensive back well before he was an NFL coach, playing in the NFL from 1994 to 2008 with the New York Jets, the Houston Texans, and several other NFL franchises. Aaron Glenn is one of the most underrated defensive backs of that era and is largely regarded as a great leader, a great player, and one of the glue pieces of many teams throughout the late 90s and early 2000s. After his playing career was over, Aaron Glenn took up coaching, where he was the Cleveland Browns assistant defensive backs coach from 2014 to 2015. He became the Saints defensive back coach from 2016 to 2020 before following Dan Campbell to the Detroit Lions with the opportunity of a lifetime to become the Detroit Lions defensive coordinator. And from 2021 to this very day, that is where Aaron Glenn has resided. Now, it hasn't always been a smooth ride for Aaron Glenn, as in 2021 and 2022, the defense wasn't very good, right? In 2021, the Detroit Lions really didn't have a chance to build the defense the way they wanted to. The defense finished as one of the worst units in the NFL, ranking 29th in the NFL overall as the 31st scoring defense, and finishing the NFL season with a 3-13-1 record. They followed that up in 2022 with a campaign that didn't look much better. 30th in the NFL in yards allowed and ranking 29th in the NFL in passing in scoring defense. The Detroit Lions were still not a great unit on that side of the ball. And while they did finish 9-8, the defense, especially down the stretch in Carolina, was a massive reason as to why they missed the playoffs and were not competing in January. Now, there were a lot of excuses for Aaron Glenn early on, right? And I think rightfully so. His defensive stars through the first two seasons in Detroit were Tracy Walker, who was a captain and led the team in tackles in 2021, followed by Will Harris and Dean Marlowe. Charles Harris and Julian Okwara were leading this team in sacks before Aiden Hutchinson arrived in 2022 as a rookie. So over the first two seasons, it was pretty understandable as to why the Detroit Lions defense wasn't very good. Yeah, they improved from 2021 to 2022, but when your defense is still relying on guys like Tracy Walker and Will Harris and Dean Marlowe and Charles Harris to be the stars of your team, you're probably not going to finish with the highest record or the best defense statistically. Now, they took that defense into 2023. They added quite a few pieces to that defense, and they certainly got better last season, right? They finished 19th in the NFL ranked defensively. They finished as the 23rd scoring defense, but ranked second in the NFL in run defense. They were 12th in the NFL in third down percentage, but their downfall was the passing attack, right? Their passing defense ranked 27th in the NFL. They ranked 28th in the NFL in passing touchdowns allowed and had just 13 interceptions on the season, which was right around a league average. But when you're giving up that many big plays and that many touchdowns, being just league average in interceptions is still going to lead to you losing quite a few football games. And if it wasn't for the Detroit Lions' elite run defense and forcing teams into third and longs over and over and over again, I think this defense would have statistically looked a lot worse, even in the scoring defensive categories where they already ranked pretty bottom tier of the NFL. Now, in 2023, Aaron Glenn had quite a bit of help that he didn't have in the previous 2 years, right? Aiden Hutchinson was in his second year and finally broke out. Aleem McNeil was in his third year and was having a fantastic season before going down with injuries. Kirby Joseph was breaking out. Brian Branch was an all-pro as a rookie. Alex Anzalone was playing very well. Ifeatu Melifonwu finally saw the field and looked fantastic. Cam Sutton, the star cornerback, was now making $11 million a year as a prized free agent acquisition. You have Derek Barnes, who took a massive step. You have Jack Campbell, who was playing very well. There were a lot of pieces on this Lions defense, and it was finally all starting to come together for Aaron Glenn. And while it wasn't perfect, you could see that there was something strong building. You could see that the foundation had been laid and that they were starting to work their way up the NFL ladder to becoming one of the league's premier defenses. Now, in 2023, Aaron Glenn had a couple of head coaching interviews. In the offseason, he interviewed with the Commanders as well as the Tennessee Titans for their vacant head coaching positions. But unfortunately for Aaron Glenn, neither of those positions ended up being the opportunity that was the right fit. The Commanders, of course, hired Dan Quinn to be their head coach, and the Tennessee Titans went with a very young, unproven offensive coordinator that has taken over for them and has done a couple of really nice things on the offensive side of the ball. So Aaron Glenn returns in 2024, and his defense is fantastic. At face value, you might look at this defense and say 17th in yards allowed, 24th in pass defense, and 6th in rushing defense. You really didn't get much better, right? You're up 2 places overall on the defensive side of the ball. You're up maybe 3 on passing defense, but you fell 4 spots in the run defense. Why are we talking about Aaron Glenn as the best coordinator in football? Well, while the yardage is certainly something that could be improved, you can't deny that the Detroit Lions have been one of the best scoring defenses and overall one of the best defenses in football when it comes to getting the opponent off the field without giving up many points. The Detroit Lions have allowed 6 passing touchdowns on the season through 9 games. They are second in the NFL in passing touchdowns allowed, while being second in the NFL in interceptions. They rank eighth in the NFL in scoring offense, being in the top 10 for the first time in nearly a decade. And they have the number one third down defense in the entirety of the NFL. That is a massive step forward from where they were a season ago. And again, the offensive yardage, yeah, doesn't look great, right? 24th in passing defense, 6th in rushing defense, 17th overall in yards allowed. But the important statistics are not letting the opponent score and taking the football away. And when it comes to that, the Detroit Lions are one of the best units in all of football. And while that by itself would be impressive, it is important to note that the Detroit Lions and Aaron Glenn are doing this with Aiden Hutchinson on injury reserve, Marcus Davenport on injury reserve, Derek Barnes on injury reserve, Ifeatu Melifonwu on injury reserve. Up until this point in the season, he has yet to play a game. John Kaminsky did not play a game this season, and he is on injury reserve. Kyle Pico went on injury reserve, I believe, in week 4 for the Detroit Lions, who has not played in the last 5 to 6 games. Emmanuel Mosley has yet to play a game for the Detroit Lions this year after he was placed on IR during training camp. Josh Paschal has missed 2 of the last 3 games where the Detroit Lions have not had a pass rush, and Malcolm Rodriguez has missed the last 3 games due to injury. And that's not all of it, right? There are Jalen Maven was just recently placed on injury reserve. Makai Wingo missed 2 games in a row with a groin injury, I believe. There are a ton of defensive players and playmakers that are unavailable for the Detroit Lions right now. And yet, despite that, Aaron Glenn has done more with this defense than I think any other coach in the NFL could possibly do. As I mentioned earlier, they are the number 8 scoring defense while being the number 2 passing defense as far as touchdowns allowed and takeaways through the secondary, while being the best third down defense in football, while missing arguably their 3 best edge rushers in Hutchinson, Davenport, and Barnes, maybe their 5th or 4th best edge rusher in John Kaminsky, while missing 2 massive pieces in the secondary and having a lot of injuries go back and forth over the last couple of weeks. They have fought through all of that to be one of the best defenses in football. And just to give a couple more stats, the Detroit Lions have just 2 games this season where their defense has allowed more than 22 points to the opposition. They have 0 games this season without a turnover in the secondary, and they've had 2, not 1, but 2 different candidates this year be legit defensive player of the year candidates. And arguably, if you want to throw in Kirby Joseph, you could probably argue for a 3rd. And it all came to a head on Sunday Night Football in Week 10 in Houston, where in the second half, where the Detroit Lions trailed by 3 scores going into it, with Houston getting the ball coming out of halftime. The Detroit Lions allowed 0 points, had 2 interceptions, forced 4 punts, as well as a fourth down stop, leading to a victory. And that was not the only thing that they did that night. They were one of the most impressive defensive performances I have seen from the Detroit Lions in my lifetime. Even looking at the first half where they allowed 23 points, first off, the first touchdown was a drive that started within the Detroit Lions red zone after an interception by the offense. So that was 7 points spotted to them. They then had to deal with 2 more interceptions in which they only allowed field goals on those ensuing possessions. And yes, they gave up a touchdown drive to end the half, right? That was a fantastic throw and an amazing catch by John Mechie and CJ Stroud, right? CJ Stroud threw a fantastic ball, and John Mechie made a great catch in tight coverage. They were down 23-7 going into halftime, but that does not tell you the story of the defense. The defense stood strong for a majority of that half, and outside of the PI call, they really didn't allow very many big plays. Yes, they allowed 2 touchdowns. They were touchdowns in which they were essentially set up to fail by the offense. And they came out in the second half and they played one of the best halves of football that Detroit has ever seen. Again, 0 points allowed to CJ Stroud and that Texans offense, with 2 takeaways, 4 punts forced in 6 consecutive drives. And they held Houston to a 58-yard field goal to win the game, in which Kaimi Fairburn missed, setting the Lions up for a victory later that night. Aaron Glenn is doing more with this Detroit Lions defense than he did last year, and it is a less talented defense than it was last year, right? This is, as far as pass rush and defensive line goes, this defense is nowhere near as talented as they were in the front seven as they were a season ago. And the secondary is certainly better, but considering all the injuries that they've had to work through, considering all the different changes Aaron Glenn has had to make for this defense to succeed and survive, I do not think there is a better coach in the NFL right now. I do not think there is a better coordinator, and I do not think there is a better head coaching candidate right now than Aaron Glenn for the Detroit Lions. And with that being said, that is all I have for you guys today. Let me know down in the comments below what you think about Aaron Glenn. Do you think that he is a top coordinator in the NFL? Do you think that he is a top head coaching candidate in the NFL going into next season? I'd be very curious to hear your guys' opinions on the Aaron Glenn saga and where they are right now, because honestly, I don't think there's a better coach in the NFL calling plays right now. But with that being said, that is all for you guys today. If you have yet to subscribe to the channel, please go down below and do so. It helps the channel out a ton. But with that being said, thank you all so much for watching. And until next time, and as always, go Lions.